let's dive into a story that so many of us think we know inside and out: the Rich Man and Lazarus. It's one of the most influential stories about the afterlife. But what if the way we've always heard it is based on a massive misunderstanding? The source material we're looking at today makes this really compelling case that there's a radical, completely different reading hiding in plain sight. So, let's get into it. I mean, this is the ultimate question, right? It's something that has fascinated people, shaped entire civilizations. What really happens in that one moment, the moment we die? And for a lot of people, the answer seems pretty simple. We die, and our soul, our conscious self, is just instantly sent to a place of reward or punishment. We're fully aware, we know what's going on. This idea is really the bedrock for a ton of belief systems. Okay, so let's start with that, a familiar afterlife picture. This whole idea of an immediate, conscious existence right after you die is so deeply ingrained in our culture, it feels like it's just always been the way people thought about it. But the source material we're digging into today is going to ask a pretty provocative question. Where did we actually get this picture from? And this is where the challenge really begins. Listen to this quote. "It will be well for us to remember that all such expressions as intermediate state, church triumphant, and others similar to them are unknown to Scripture. They have been inherited by us from tradition." Whoa, okay, so that's a bold claim. The source is basically saying that these core concepts we use all the time aren't actually in the Bible. They're traditions we've just inherited, and that sets up the central conflict we're going to explore. And that brings us right to the heart of the argument: tradition versus Scripture. See, the source material builds its entire case on this one distinction, suggesting that if you carefully read the original texts, the picture of the afterlife you get is dramatically different from the one we've all inherited. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the traditional view. Death is just a doorway, a gateway to another life, and you have a soul that passes through it. But on the right, you've got the argument from Scripture. Death is an enemy. It's like falling asleep, and you don't have a soul. You are a soul. That is a huge difference, so let's unpack what that even means. So let's dive into the original Hebrew. The source points to this word, nephesh. It argues that this term doesn't mean some separate conscious thing that can float around without a body. Nope. Instead, a living soul is what you get when you combine two things: a physical body, made from dust, and the breath of life or spirit. When those two things separate at death, well, the living soul just ceases to exist. Now, to make this idea a little less abstract, the source gives us this great analogy. Think about a rifle. A barrel by itself, not a rifle. A stock by itself, also not a rifle. But when you put them together, you create a totally new, distinct thing: a rifle. The argument is that the same logic applies to us. Body plus spirit equals a third thing: a living soul. And the source backs this up with a ton of verses from the Old Testament, like this one from Psalm 115. "The dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence." The logic here is pretty straightforward. If the dead are in silence and they can't praise anyone or know anything, that directly challenges this idea of an immediate, conscious afterlife, right? Okay, but what about the New Testament? I know what you're thinking. This is where we have to tackle some of those really difficult verses, the ones that seem to fly right in the face of this soul sleep idea. So let's see how the source material rereads them. And this is probably the biggest one, the most cited verse on the whole topic. You know the story. The thief on the cross asked Jesus to remember him, and Jesus' reply seems crystal clear. "Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise." Paradise, that very day. Case closed, right? Well, hold on. Here's the twist. The source makes a fascinating point. The original Greek manuscripts didn't have any punctuation, no commas, no periods. That little comma was added by translators centuries later. So what happens if you just move it? "Verily I say unto thee, this day thou shalt be with me in paradise." Suddenly the meaning completely changes. "I say unto thee this day" was a common Hebrew idiom, a way of making a really solemn promise. So it's not a statement about when they'll be in paradise. It's about when the promise is being made. Right here, right now, today. Okay, what about that other famous one, absent from the body, present with the Lord? The source claims this is almost always misquoted, just ripped completely out of context. The argument is when you actually read the whole chapter, Paul isn't talking about dying. He's talking about the hope of resurrection. He even says he doesn't want to be unclothed by death. His real desire is to be clothed upon with a brand new resurrected body. And all of this brings us to the main event, decoding the rich man. Honestly, this one story is the primary pillar holding up the whole idea of a conscious state right after death. So how in the world does the source material explain it? And this is the question we have to ask. Is the story of the rich man and Lazarus meant to be taken as literal history? Because according to the source, if we take this story literally, it creates this huge contradiction with dozens of other scriptures that describe death as an unconscious sleep. So that forces the question, what if it's not meant to be literal at all? The source points out some major problems with a literal reading. First, there are the logical things, right? Like, how can a spirit without a body have a physical tongue or a finger? But maybe more importantly, there are some serious theological issues. The story seems to say that salvation is based on being poor and damnation is based on being rich. That just completely contradicts the foundational Christian doctrine of salvation by faith. So here it is, the core thesis of this whole interpretation. Jesus wasn't teaching new doctrine here. He was using satire. The argument is that he literally took the Pharisees' own popular, non-biblical beliefs about the afterlife and turned them into a story designed to expose their hypocrisy. He weaponized their own traditions against them. And the evidence for this satirical reading is, well, it's pretty compelling. Just look at this table. It compares the details in the story with Pharisaic traditions about Hades that were recorded by the historian Josephus. And the parallels are just stunning. Abraham's bosom, angels carrying souls, a great gulf fixed, they're almost identical. The source is arguing that Jesus was deliberately, masterfully using the Pharisees' own playbook against them. And this, according to the source, is the story's real punchline. After setting this incredibly elaborate stage using their own traditions, Jesus, through the character of Abraham, delivers the actual message. Stop relying on these made-up stories and go back to the written word. They have noses and the prophets. Let them hear them. So, if this interpretation is correct, if death really is an unconscious sleep, where does that leave the ultimate hope for believers? Well, according to the source, it doesn't get rid of hope at all. It just radically refocuses it on the resurrection. See, in this view, the central hope isn't about your soul taking an immediate trip to heaven. It's all about that future event, the resurrection, the moment when the body and spirit are brought back together and that living soul is made whole again. For someone who believes, the very next conscious moment after they die is waking up on Resurrection Day. And the source argues this whole debate about what death is goes all the way back to the very beginning. It points to what it calls the first great lie, right there in the Garden of Eden. God's warning was clear, you will die. But the serpent's counteroffer was, ye shall not surely die, basically implying that death isn't really an end, it's just a transition. So why does any of this matter? What's the big deal? Well, the source argues it has massive implications. If the dead are truly asleep, it puts all the focus and hope back on the future resurrection. It also completely removes the foundation for things like praying to saints or trying to communicate with the dead. Because if the dead know not anything, then there's simply no one there to hear or respond. And that's really where this whole re-examination leaves us. It challenges every one of us to take a hard look at our own beliefs and ask a really powerful question. How much of what I believe is built on the solid rock of Scripture, and how much is just built on the comfortable scaffolding of tradition that we've inherited? That's a question worth exploring. Thanks so much for joining me.